Let's not play around. You know Pokemon. Whether you're a longtime fan who grew up with it like me, or you've simply played the odd game or two that happened to be at a friend's house. I'm here today to tell you about a hidden gem I don't believe enough people know about within the Pokemon franchise, a spin-off that doesn't get enough love. No, I'm not talking about Mystery Dungeon, I'm not talking about Ranger, and I'm not talking about Snap. This game, through all the years, has not gotten a sequel yet. I'm talking about Pokemon Conquest. If this is your first time hearing about the game, then let me have the privilege to tell you all about it.
What is it?
Pokemon Conquest is a top-down, turn-based strategy game with heavy influences from Japanese history and culture. Judging from the gameplay, you may think this is very different from any Pokemon game you might have seen, and you'd be right. What if I told you that this game is not developed mostly by the Pokemon Company, instead by a company called, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, Koei Tecmo, a game development studio behind games you may have heard of like Neo and the Dead or Alive games that you see people play as a joke, the plot, and even having a hand in a few of the Fire Emblem games. As far as my research goes, Pokemon Conquest was the first and last Pokemon game Koei Tecmo ever made.
The story and gameplay.
The game starts with you picking your gender, then telling you the story of the brand new Ransei region. Basically, the gist of the Ransei region is that there are 17 kingdoms, which are the homes of different types of Pokemon and Pokemon trainers. And the legend in the region goes that whoever can unite and conquer all 17 kingdoms will get the legendary Pokemon to appear and be theirs. Also, people in the Ransei region don't use Pokeballs to capture Pokemon. Instead, there's a select group of people who have a gift of being able to connect and form strong bonds with Pokemon. You are one of these people. The story opens with the player character arriving in the new kingdom they're in charge of called Aurora, a kingdom who specializes in normal type Pokemon. The player and their starting Eevee, yes, an Eevee, you don't get to choose your starter, but hold on, walk through the gates to meet some of the locals who greet you with skeptical eyes, wondering if you'll truly ever bring greatness to Aurora. Conveniently, just after this, a neighboring kingdom of Ignis attacks Aurora in an attempt to capture it. You and your Eevee go in to stop the invasion alone, when a local girl named Oichi comes in to help with her Jigglypuff. Oichi teaches you the basics of the combat, and you're off. The player character and its team always goes first, which I don't believe is the best, and ends up giving you an early advantage. I wish it was based on a speed stat or a coin flip or something. Which reminds me, there are some notable differences in menus and in stats in Conquest. Firstly, every Pokemon has 5 stats: attack, defense, range, and accuracy. Attack and defense aren't separated into special and non-special, just as there's no such thing as special attacks. And range determines how many spaces on the grid of the battlefield you're able to move. Each Pokemon has one attack and an ability, with some new ones and some returning that have been modified to accompany the combat of Conquest. And the owner of each Pokemon actually has their own hand in the battles. You see, it's still the Pokemon doing all the fighting, but the warrior of each Pokemon has a special ability they can use once a fight, along with one item they're able to use per battle like a potion or a status gear. Warrior abilities can be anything from raising stats, upping crit chance, or even having a global heal. The main gameplay of Conquest consists of you recruiting new warriors, new Pokemon to your army, and fighting a neighboring kingdom, rinsing and repeating. And let me tell you, I love it. It sounds boring on paper, I know, but please trust me when I say I'm genuinely entranced by this core gameplay. As the player character conquers new kingdoms, you hear about how another warlord by the name of Nobunaga is growing his territory up to the north. Once you've conquered half of the kingdoms, you find out that this Nobunaga character has conquered the other half. That after taking one of his kingdoms, you're not able to recruit the old warriors and warlords of the kingdom as you have been so far, as they're forced to retreat back to Nobunaga. The game actually gets harder later on because your growth of warriors are halted slightly, and you face stronger enemies, more complex types, and more complicated and frustrating battlefields, such as how the Ghost Kingdom has the floating balls of fire that can randomly decide to run into one of your Pokemons and paralyze them, poison them, freeze them, or inflict some other annoying status. You keep on your journey, taking every kingdom until the only one left is Nobunaga's, of dragon types, and Nobunaga himself using a motherfucking Zekrom. Is anyone gonna ask how he got one of those? No? Alright. And I'm not gonna lie, this fight is the lamest of the whole game. Nobunaga's AI for some reason just sits there and waits for the player character to get to a certain part of his long hallway battlefield before he actually decides to move any of his troops. giving the player ample amounts of time to position himself and destroy his clumped together troops. Sure, Nobunaga himself is pretty tough, but it becomes exponentially easier to take on an enemy 8 versus 1 after you kill every other one of his troops. After this hard battle, a light shines out from the kingdom and the legendary Pokémon has been summoned. The reveal for the legendary Pokémon lost its touch now, but I remember playing this game 8 years ago and I was so hyped for it. It turns out the legendary Pokémon the region has been fighting for centuries was Arceus, and upon seeing it, Arceus tells you to link with it, and Arceus becomes your Pokémon. But also, just at that moment, Nobunaga comes back with an army of 7 other warlords you fought in the past, and not to mention Nobunaga just has a shiny Rayquaza now and no one wonders how he got it. Anyways, this fight, while still a little too easy, definitely makes up for the last lackluster fight. After defeating Nobunaga for the last time, Arceus just tells you you're too young to use him and right off. Then, right after that, the player just gives back all the captured kingdoms to the rightful owners for no damn reason. This still makes me upset. If you were the super warlord of an entire continent that had been in a massive civil war for centuries, would you just give it up as soon as you got it? The post-game. The ending, even though it's dumb, sets up for the post-game. The post-game is almost unfair to call it a post-game, when in reality it's an entirely new game. You get a choice of 10 odd stories to choose from, playing as completely different and new characters and their quest to capture Ransei, or maybe just a chunk of it. This adds many more hours of playtime, just when you thought the game was over too quickly. And, after you complete all these stories, from what I understand, I actually haven't gotten to this part yet, the player character comes back and you get a whole other story where you come back to conquer the kingdoms again with much tougher enemies. Appreciation for the art direction. I have to dedicate a whole section to this topic because I simply cannot shut up about how much I love the art and sprite work of this game, especially when it comes to the various warriors and warlords. Obviously this game has heavy Japanese influence, but I think it pulls it off so well. Starting with the player character, I honestly first played the game as a girl, then replayed it just because I wanted to see what the boys' character sprites looked like. Because with the starting model, later in the game your character does this weird evolving thing where they reach a new form or something, and your character gets a whole new outfit and brand new sprites. Your sprite further updates when your Pokemon evolves, because I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but each warrior has a perfect Pokemon that is truly meant for them, yours being an Eevee. Later in the game you get a chance to evolve your Eevee, and no matter which one you pick, you get brand new sprites with that certain evolution. I heard and read complaints that the character starts out with an Eevee, but I think it's a great idea since you technically have the ability to get that many different types for whatever suits your style. You even have the opportunity to get more Eevees later on, so you could potentially have all evolutions if you really wanted to. Every warlord of each kingdom obviously specializes in a certain type, and it's said that they are designed to resemble the Pokemon that's their perfect link. Well, in some cases I can obviously see, but others are a real head scratcher. Like, the Fighting Warlord's perfect is a Girder/Conkeldurr. You can see that, can't you? But then let's look at the Bug Warlord. What Pokemon do you think he specializes with? Here, I'll give you a moment to think. Pause the video if you need. Alright? Ready? It's f***ing Pineco. Pineco. You're telling me this bastard is supposed to look like a Pineco? For the most part, you can tell what a certain character is all about just by looking at them. And that's a sign of great character design. Like, this guy's a cocky a-hole, and this guy's so edgy he cuts himself while fluffing his pillow. You can eventually recruit each one to fight for you, find their perfect Pokemon, and their sprites update to accompany that Pokemon. As great as the sprites are, I won't lie, there's a slight bit of laziness in some places. For example, Oichi, your right-hand woman for the entire game, has her sprite using Jigglypuff, and they're great sprites. But as soon as you evolve her Jigglypuff to Wigglytuff, the Wigglytuff just straight up disappears from her sprites. They're nowhere to be found. Or how one of the warriors is literally the same sprite they use for a traveling merchant. Supposedly some of the warlords are supposed to be based on actual characters during Japanese history, which I don't know enough about Japanese history to know. What would you guys think if we had a Conquest game based off the American Revolution or something? That'd be hilarious. Imagine George Washington and Alexander Hamilton fighting King George III with a Pikachu and a Squirtle. Anywho, The art doesn't take a back seat after the story is over either. In the new episodes, you get to play as brand new, never before seen characters who have all unique sprites, new dialogue, and their own perfect Pokemon, etc. Also, just look at Nene. I don't need to explain why she's great. Oh baby. The background and impact. Pokemon Conquest released in 2012, 2 years after the Black and White games took the markets by storm. With so many people being introduced to the series with the 5th generation of games, including yours truly, surely these brand new spin-off games would share the same love, right? Well, not in Pokemon Conquest's case. See, back in 2012 when Conquest came out, the 3DS had been out for a year already, and Conquest was a DS-only kind of game. With games like Mystery Dungeon Gates to Infinity coming out within the same year, was a game like Pokemon Conquest going to appeal to people with its 2D sprite work and Japanese art style? Turns out it didn't. But it didn't even appeal to Japanese audiences anymore. See, Pokemon Black and White sold nearly 2.6 million copies in Japan alone. How many did Conquest sell, you ask? About 300,000 in Japan. I honestly couldn't find any numbers on how many it sold in the US, but I doubt it was all that many more. This game was only ever released in English and Japanese, meaning most of the world has never gotten to experience this game at all. To see why Conquest flopped in Japan's markets, let's look at the game in Japanese. The game in Japanese isn't called Pokemon Conquest. Instead, this game is called Pokemon Plus Nobunaga's Ambition. Well, if you were paying attention to the other parts of the video, you'd know that Nobunaga is the main villain. But why does it seem like I'm expected to know about him? Well, turns out that Nobunaga's Ambition is its own independent IP that's a tactical RPG with heavy focus on Japanese history. So Pokemon Conquest is a crossover the entire time. After looking into the Nobunaga's Ambition franchise, I found out that it was a mostly Japan game, not seeing much attention outside the country. But even in Japan, it's not that much of a sought-after game, only receiving mediocre sales numbers and just good enough reviews. So it's quite curious as to why this crossover ever happened. Was Nobunaga's Ambition hoping to see a new revitalization after being on the same cover with Pokemon? Did Game Freak just not want to make a new Pokemon game, so when Koei Tecmo came knocking on their door with money and said to develop a new game, they just said okay? I honestly don't know. Conclusion. I've been ranting about this game for far too long now, but I sincerely hope I've convinced some of you out there to play it, or if you're fortunate enough to have a copy, to pick it up again. If you stuck it out this far, first, let me thank you. Then I'll answer the question that's burning in your soul. How do I get my hands on this game? You want my honest answer? Emulation. I know, gasp, emulation is illegal. Come on, this game is 8 years old, and it's only for a system that's older than that. Since this game never sold nearly enough copies, the ones that are still around go for insanely high prices. As much as I want to support the developers who made this game, I simply can't justify you people paying $100 plus to play this. Emulation is honestly how I experienced this work from my childhood, so hey, if you want some advice on how to play this game, ask in the comments. I have nothing else better to do than refresh the page in this video anyways. Alright, that's all for me. Please consider sharing this video or giving it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Spread the word of this horribly underappreciated masterpiece. Thank you, and good nights.